Ngozi had always dreamed of working at the luxury boutique, but the reality of her job was far from glamorous. Every day, she arrived to face her boss's sharp tongue and cruel remarks. He never missed a chance to call her lazy or irresponsible whenever she walked in a little late. Though she tried her best, life's struggles sometimes slowed her down. Still, she kept silent, swallowing her pain, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. What her boss didn't know was that Ngozi carried a secret that could change everything. Behind her quiet smile stood someone powerful who believed in her. For months, she had been mentored by the governor's wife, a woman who saw Ngozi's potential and encouraged her to dream bigger. But Ngozi never revealed this connection, choosing to remain humble, even while enduring her boss's insults. One bright morning, the boutique staff were buzzing as they prepared for an important client visit. The boss stood near the entrance, ready to sneer the moment Ngozi showed up late again. He whispered loudly to others, mocking her before she had even arrived. But the moment came in a way no one expected. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop right outside the boutique. The tinted window slid down, and everyone froze when they recognized the governor's wife in the passenger seat. The door opened, and Ngozi stepped out gracefully, carrying her bag as though nothing unusual was happening. The governor's wife smiled warmly and spoke to her like a daughter, reminding her to call later. The boutique workers exchanged shocked glances, unable to believe what they were seeing. The boss's face drained of color. His usual arrogance vanished instantly, replaced by awkward silence. He stammered, trying to act polite, but it was too late. His cruel words from earlier still hung in the air, and everyone saw his fear. For the first time, Ngozi didn't need to defend herself. The truth spoke louder than anything she could say. From that day, the atmosphere in the boutique shifted. No one dared look down on her again, and her boss treated her with a new respect born out of shame. Ngozi walked taller, knowing she no longer had to hide her worth. The black SUV had not only dropped her at work, it had dropped the mask her boss wore, revealing the coward beneath his pride. Amara walked into the law firm, her heart heavy as she tried to steady herself. She had barely stepped through the door when her boss's voice cut through the air. He called her out in front of the entire office, mocking her lateness and questioning if she even deserved the job. His tone was sharp, filled with contempt, and his words made some colleagues hide their smirks while others looked away in pity. Amara stood there, keeping her head down, swallowing the embarrassment like she had done many times before. Her boss continued, piling insult upon insult, asking if she thought the firm was a playground. Amara's chest burned, but she stayed silent. She knew her truth, and she knew something no one else in that room was aware of. The humiliation felt unbearable, yet she reminded herself to remain calm. Her strength wasn't in shouting back, it was in what was waiting for her outside those doors. The day carried on, and whispers about her late arrival lingered in the halls. Finally, when it was time for her break, Amara walked toward the entrance. The staff followed with curious eyes, ready to gossip more about her. Just as she stepped out, a deep rumble echoed down the street. Heads turned as a military convoy rolled up, the powerful sound of a motorcycle leading the way. Sitting on that striking bike was none other than her brother, the decorated army general. He removed his helmet, and his commanding presence made bystanders freeze. Soldiers in the convoy followed behind, their disciplined stance leaving the crowd speechless. Amara's brother smiled at her with pride, greeting her warmly as though she were the most important person in the world. The office staff gawked, unable to process the scene. The same colleagues who had giggled at her humiliation now stood wide-eyed. The boss who had ridiculed her earlier was rooted in place, his arrogance melting into discomfort. He couldn't hide the shame written all over his face. Amara didn't need to say a single word. Her brother's presence spoke for her louder than anything she could ever argue. The people who thought she was small now understood she came from strength and honor. That single arrival on the motorcycle turned the entire narrative around, leaving everyone stunned and reminding them never to underestimate her again. Ijeoma dragged herself into the bank, her steps heavy with worry. She had been late again, and she already knew what was waiting for her. The moment she entered, her boss's voice rang out, sharp and humiliating. He pointed at her in front of her colleagues, asking if she thought the bank ran on her personal schedule. He mocked her as though she were worthless, comparing her to others who arrived early. Each word cut into her, but she remained silent, clutching her bag tighter as everyone watched the scene. The boss didn't stop there. He ridiculed her background, saying she had no discipline and no future if she continued this way. His tone was cruel, his eyes full of disdain, and he clearly enjoyed putting her down. Ijeoma lowered her gaze, hiding the storm brewing inside her. She knew he had no idea of the truth, and she wasn't about to explain herself to a man who thrived on disrespect. As the day passed, whispers followed her wherever she went. Some coworkers pitied her, while others enjoyed the drama. Ijeoma focused on her work, determined not to let his words destroy her spirit. She knew something no one else in that office did, something that would change everything in just a few hours. When the clock struck closing time, the staff began heading out, and the boss lingered near the glass doors, ready to deliver another round of mocking comments. But then a sleek convoy of luxury cars appeared outside, catching everyone's attention. The centerpiece was a shining black Rolls-Royce, and stepping out of it was a man whose presence demanded respect. He was Ijeoma's uncle, the billionaire tycoon known across the country. Gasps filled the room as the chauffeur opened the door for Ijeoma. Her uncle greeted her warmly, asking if she was ready to head home. The way he spoke to her, with affection and pride, left no doubt about their bond. The boss's jaw nearly dropped, his face turned pale, his arrogance melting into fear. The same man who had insulted her only hours ago now shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her eyes. Ijeoma walked out with quiet dignity, sliding into the car beside her uncle. In that instant, the power dynamic flipped completely. The woman he had treated like nothing was someone far beyond his reach, and he would never look at her the same way again. Chidinma worked long hours at the event agency, always giving her best to make sure clients were happy. But no matter how hard she tried, her boss never showed her kindness. One morning, she arrived a little late after a restless night, and the moment she walked in, her boss's sharp voice filled the office. He mocked her in front of everyone, calling her unreliable and careless. He smirked as if embarrassing her made him more powerful. Some staff giggled quietly, while others looked down, uncomfortable with the way she was treated. Chidinma kept calm, even though her heart ached. She knew the effort she put into her work, but her boss always chose to see only her mistakes. What no one in the office knew was that her life outside those walls was very different. She carried a secret that could silence every insult, but she never felt the need to brag. She believed her work should speak for her, not her connections. That day, the humiliation seemed worse than usual, and her boss promised to cut her pay if she ever arrived late again. Chidinma quietly nodded and went about her tasks, though her colleagues whispered about her behind her back. By the time the day ended, she was drained and ready to go home. As she stepped out of the building, the staff who had been mocking her followed closely, eager to see if she would leave alone. But then a luxury car pulled up, cameras flashing as passers-by recognized the man stepping out. It was none other than Nollywood's biggest star, adored by millions across the country. The crowd outside screamed in excitement, pulling out their phones to take pictures. The actor walked straight toward Chidinma, smiling as he reached for her hand. He greeted her warmly, kissed her forehead, and held the door open for her. The office workers stood frozen, mouths wide open, unable to believe what they were seeing. Her boss, who had insulted her only hours earlier, rushed outside, his face pale with shock. He tried to smile, clapping awkwardly as though he had always supported her. But the shame in his eyes gave him away. Everyone saw the shift, his arrogance had been shattered. Chidinma entered the car beside her fiancé with quiet confidence, leaving her boss standing there, exposed and humiliated. The reveal had spoken louder than any defense she could ever give. Zainab had always been dedicated to her work at the hospital, but no matter how hard she tried, her boss never appreciated her efforts. One morning, she arrived a little late after helping her neighbor with an emergency. The moment she stepped in, her boss's harsh voice echoed through the ward. He ridiculed her in front of the nurses, saying she was careless and didn't respect her job. His words cut deep, and some of her colleagues snickered quietly while others looked away, embarrassed by his cruelty. Zainab stood still, holding back her tears. She wanted to explain but knew it wouldn't matter. Her boss enjoyed making her feel small. Day after day, he found ways to belittle her, always pointing out mistakes and ignoring her good work. She kept her head down, silently wishing that one day he would realize she deserved respect. What no one knew was that Zainab carried a powerful truth she never used to her advantage. Later that afternoon, the staff gathered near the reception as a commotion stirred outside. A convoy of official cars pulled up, and people in the hospital turned to look. The door of one car opened, and the chief judge of the state stepped out, his presence commanding instant attention. His suit was neat, his posture firm, and his eyes sharp with authority. Gasps filled the air when he walked directly toward Zainab. She greeted him warmly, and he smiled proudly at his daughter, handing her a file she had forgotten at home. His voice was gentle with her, full of affection, and everyone around instantly understood their bond. The silence in the reception was heavy, broken only by the whispers of shocked staff. Her boss, who had mocked her that very morning, suddenly froze. His face turned pale, and sweat formed on his forehead. He tried to act polite, rushing forward with a fake smile, greeting the chief judge with nervous respect. But the damage was already done. Everyone had witnessed how cruelly he had spoken to her before knowing who she was. Zainab thanked her father and walked back in with quiet dignity, her colleagues staring in awe. From that moment, no one dared to look down on her again. The boss who once ridiculed her now trembled at the thought of his words, knowing he had humiliated the daughter of the most powerful judge in the state. Funk worked hard at the office every single day, but no matter how much effort she put in, her boss never stopped making her feel small. He spoke to her with harsh words, calling her slow, careless, and unworthy of the position. Whenever she tried to share an idea, he dismissed her immediately, sometimes even laughing at her in front of her colleagues. The constant belittling became routine, and some staff joined in, treating her as if she were beneath them. Funk kept quiet, never arguing back, because she believed the truth always reveals itself in time. What no one knew was that Funk carried a family connection far greater than anyone in that office could imagine. She never boasted, never revealed it, and never used it to demand special treatment. She wanted to build her own path, even if that meant enduring the arrogance of a boss who thrived on putting her down. But destiny has a way of changing things in one single moment. One bright afternoon, the office was preparing for an important client meeting. Funk's boss scolded her yet again, raising his voice so everyone could hear. He accused her of being useless and told her she was lucky to even have a job. His words stung deeply, but Funk stayed calm, her expression steady. Just then, the sound of drums and footsteps echoed outside the building. Curious staff rushed to the windows, and gasps filled the air. A royal convoy had arrived, complete with guards dressed in dazzling traditional regalia. Their presence was powerful, their formation precise, and their aura demanded respect. At the center of the scene was the crown prince himself, stepping out with elegance and authority. The guards created a circle of protection around him as he moved toward the building. To everyone's shock, his eyes lit up when he saw Funk. He called her by name, smiling warmly, and embraced her like family. The staff's mouths dropped open when he introduced her proudly as his cousin. Funk's boss, who had spent months tearing her down, now stood frozen. His arrogance drained instantly, replaced by trembling fear. He tried to bow respectfully, stuttering words he could barely form. But the damage was done. The entire office had seen the truth. Funk walked away with the crown prince, surrounded by royal guards, leaving behind a silence so heavy it crushed her boss's pride. In that moment, everyone realized she was never the small person he made her out to be. Adiz scrubbed floors and polished tables at the hotel with quiet dedication, never complaining even when her body ached. Still, her manager always found reasons to scold her. One morning, she arrived later than usual after helping her neighbor's child who had fallen ill. Instead of understanding, the manager seized the chance to embarrass her. He mocked her in front of the staff, saying she was lazy, unprofessional, and lucky to even have such a small job. Some workers laughed under their breath, while others shook their heads sadly, but Adiz kept silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. Day after day, she endured the same treatment. Her boss looked down on her because of her uniform and position, never once considering that she had her own dignity. What no one knew was that Adiz carried a secret that could turn every insult into shame. She chose not to reveal it because she believed respect should come from one's character, not from showing off connections. Still, the sting of humiliation stayed with her. That afternoon, the staff gathered at the hotel entrance, waiting for new guests. The manager stood proudly, puffing out his chest, while Adiz worked quietly behind them. Suddenly, the sound of luxury cars pulling up caught everyone's attention. The hotel lobby filled with whispers as a convoy of official vehicles stopped right outside. From the lead car stepped a graceful woman dressed in an elegant suit, surrounded by security officers. Gasps spread quickly when people recognized her face from television. She was a United Nations ambassador, respected worldwide for her work. The manager and the staff hurried to greet her, bowing and smiling nervously. But to their shock, the ambassador ignored their greetings and walked straight toward Adiz. Her eyes softened, and she hugged her tightly, calling her sister, with warmth and pride. The entire lobby froze. Workers stared in disbelief, while the manager's face turned pale. The same woman he had mocked that morning was standing in the embrace of one of the most powerful voices in the country. The respect that had been denied to Adiz suddenly shifted in an instant. From that day, no one dared to laugh at her again. The manager's arrogance collapsed, leaving only guilt and shame. Adiz walked taller, not because of her sister's title, but because the truth had finally silenced every insult. Halima worked at the fashion house with quiet determination, but no matter how hard she tried, her boss always found ways to make her feel small. One morning, she arrived a few minutes late after helping her neighbor's child get to school. The moment she walked in, her boss pounced, mocking her in front of the designers and tailors. He called her careless, unreliable, and unworthy of working in such a prestigious place. His voice carried through the room, and some of her colleagues laughed quietly while others kept their heads down, too afraid to speak up. Halima's cheeks burned with shame, but she stayed silent. She didn't defend herself, even though she knew his words were unfair. For weeks, he had made her the target of his anger, treating her as though she were the weakest in the room. What he never knew was that Halima carried a truth far greater than his insults. She never spoke of her private life at work because she wanted to succeed on her own merit, not because of the man she was married to. The day dragged on, and the boss continued throwing snide remarks at her, making her tasks harder with unnecessary criticism. Halima kept her head low and focused, determined not to let him see her hurt. But fate had its own way of changing things. When the closing hour came, staff began gathering their belongings. The boss lingered near the entrance, ready with another insult as she prepared to leave. Then, the sound of an expensive engine roared outside. The staff turned toward the window, their eyes widening as a shining black Rolls-Royce pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door, and from it emerged a tall, confident man whose face was well known across the country. He was a powerful oil magnate, one of the wealthiest men in the region. To everyone's shock, he walked directly to Halima, his eyes softening as he greeted her warmly and kissed her forehead. Gasps filled the room. The staff froze in disbelief, and the boss's jaw dropped. His arrogant smirk vanished, replaced with fear and regret. He realized instantly that the woman he had mocked so often was married to one of the most influential men in the nation. Halima entered the car with quiet grace, leaving her boss trembling in shame. That single moment flipped the balance, and from then on, no one dared to treat her with disrespect again. Kemi worked at a growing tech startup, pouring her energy into late nights of coding and problem-solving. But no matter how much effort she gave, her boss never showed her kindness. One morning, she rushed in a few minutes behind schedule, and the moment she stepped through the door, her boss's voice thundered across the office. He yelled at her in front of everyone, calling her lazy, careless, and unfit to work in such an important company. His tone was harsh, and his words left the other employees shifting uncomfortably at their desks. Kemi stood still, her face burning with embarrassment. She wanted to explain that she had been up all night fixing a system bug, but she knew it would not matter. Her boss thrived on authority and loved humiliating her whenever he got the chance. She swallowed her pride, deciding silence was better than fueling his anger. What he didn't know was that Kemi's story ran deeper than he could ever imagine. The hours passed, and whispers filled the office about the morning's incident. Some colleagues felt pity for her, while others secretly enjoyed the drama. But Kemi kept her focus on her work, knowing that the truth would one day show itself. That truth arrived faster than anyone expected. As the day ended, staff gathered near the entrance, waiting to leave. The boss hovered nearby, ready to throw another sarcastic remark. Suddenly, a sleek car pulled up outside, polished to perfection, and out stepped a man whose face was well known in the business world. It was one of the country's most respected venture capitalists, famous for backing successful companies and shaping industries. To the shock of everyone, he walked straight toward Kemi. His smile was warm, and his voice carried affection as he greeted her and asked about her day. Without hesitation, he opened the car door for her, showing a level of care no one expected. The office froze in silence, their eyes wide as whispers spread quickly. The boss's smugness disappeared instantly. His face turned pale, his lips trembled, and he forced a weak smile. When he realized this man was the majority investor in the very company he managed, his confidence crumbled completely. Kemi entered the car with quiet grace, leaving behind stunned faces and a boss who finally understood he had been insulting the one person he should have respected most. From that moment, the power in the office shifted, and she was never looked down on again. Reese rushed toward the restaurant, her heart racing as she worried about being late again. She had barely stepped inside when her boss's voice exploded across the room. He mocked her in front of the staff and customers, calling her lazy, irresponsible, and a disgrace to the workplace. His words echoed loudly, and some waiters exchanged smirks while others tried to avoid eye contact. Reese stood there, clutching her apron, swallowing her shame. She wanted to explain that traffic had delayed her, but she knew her boss would never listen. He raised his voice even more, telling everyone that if they wanted an example of failure, they should look at Reese. His insults were cruel, designed to break her spirit. Still, she kept calm, her eyes lowered, because she knew something the others didn't. She carried a truth that would soon silence every voice mocking her. As the day went on, the humiliation lingered in the air. Some co-workers whispered about her behind her back, repeating the boss's words, while others pitied her. Reese focused on her work quietly, holding on to her dignity. Then came the moment that would change everything. When her shift ended, she walked toward the entrance, ready to leave. The boss stood nearby with folded arms, waiting to throw another sarcastic remark. But outside, the sound of honking and cheering filled the street. A luxury car pulled up, and fans screamed in excitement. Cameras began flashing wildly as the door opened, revealing a world-famous footballer, the newest signing for Chelsea. His face was everywhere in the media, adored by millions. To everyone's shock, he walked straight to Reese, smiling as he called her by name. He pulled her into his arms, greeting her with affection, and opened the car door for her. Paparazzi snapped photos as the crowd shouted his name. The entire restaurant froze in disbelief. The boss's arrogance drained instantly. His mocking words turned to silence, his lips trembling as he realized the truth. The same woman he had humiliated was the girlfriend of a global superstar. The cameras caught everything, and in that moment, it was the boss who looked like a fool. Reese entered the car with quiet pride, leaving behind stunned coworkers and a boss who could never erase his shame. Bustias. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.